The 1950s gave us some of the most beautiful and iconic vehicles, but also some truly bizarre pickups. From strange designs to ideas that just didn't make sense, these 12 trucks will leave you scratching your head. Ever seen a pickup with fins, or one that barely functioned as a truck? Get ready for a wild ride through the silliest pickups of the 50s. The 1957 Chevrolet Cameo Carrier is one of the most fascinating and misunderstood pickup trucks ever built. In an era when trucks were seen strictly as workhorses, tools for farmers, construction workers, and tradesmen, Chevrolet made a bold move. They tried to reimagine what a pickup truck could be, blending utility with style, and the result was the Cameo Carrier, a vehicle that looked more like a high-end car than a rugged work machine. However, while Chevrolet was ahead of its time, the truck-buying public wasn't ready for such a dramatic shift. The Cameo Carrier was a commercial failure, yet today it is a highly sought-after classic that represents the first step toward the luxury trucks we see on the road today. When the Cameo Carrier debuted in 1955, it was unlike anything else in the truck market. Instead of the typical exposed bed seams and flared fenders seen on work trucks, Chevrolet gave the Cameo smooth, integrated fiberglass rear fenders that flowed seamlessly into the body, creating a sleek, futuristic design. This was a radical departure from traditional pickup styling, making the truck appear more like a streamlined passenger car than a rough-and-tumble hauler. It borrowed many elements from Chevrolet's car lineup, including a distinctive chrome grille, two-tone paint, and a stylish wraparound rear window. The Cameo even came with full wheel covers and white wall tires, something unheard of in the world of utilitarian pickups. The luxury treatment extended to the interior, where Chevrolet abandoned the no-frills, all-business design of traditional trucks. While most pickups had metal dashboards, basic vinyl bench seats, and Spartan controls, the Cameo featured an upscale cabin with carpeting, a two-tone dash, and chrome accents. Buyers could opt for features normally reserved for sedans, such as a radio and a deluxe steering wheel. The goal was clear. Chevrolet wanted the Cameo to appeal to buyers who needed the practicality of a truck, but desired the comfort and refinement of a car. However, despite all of its innovations, the Cameo Carrier had one major problem. It wasn't what truck buyers wanted. The farmers, ranchers, and blue-collar workers who needed a truck to haul heavy loads or tackle tough jobs saw the Cameo as too fancy, too delicate, and too expensive. At $2,250 in 1957, equivalent to about $23,000 today, it cost significantly more than a standard Chevrolet 3100 pickup. The fiberglass bedsides, while stylish, were more fragile than steel and prone to cracking or damage. The sleek, high-gloss paint job made owners hesitant to load up the bed with anything that could scratch or dent it. Some buyers even went to the extreme of installing carpets or blankets into a cargo area just to protect the finish, completely defeating the purpose of owning a truck. Owner review. I bought one thinking I'd have a cool truck. Turns out I was too scared to put anything in the bed because I didn't want to scratch the paint. So I just drove it around like a big, useless car. Sales reflected the lukewarm reception. In 1955, Chevrolet sold just over 5,000 Cameo Carriers. By 1957, when the truck received minor updates, including a more powerful 283 cubic inch V8 engine, sales had already plummeted to just 2,240 units. By 1958, Chevrolet pulled the plug on the Cameo, replacing it with the Fleetside, which had a similar smooth-sided look but was far more affordable and practical. Despite its commercial failure, the Cameo Carrier was not a bad truck. It was simply ahead of its time. It introduced the idea that a pickup truck could be more than just a tool. It could also be a stylish, comfortable vehicle that appealed to a wider range of buyers. While the Cameo itself didn't succeed, it planted the seed for what would become one of the biggest shifts in the truck market. By the 1970s, trucks like the Chevrolet Silverado and Ford F-150 began offering more comfort, luxury, and passenger-friendly features. By the 1990s and 2000s, fully loaded pickups with leather interiors, high-tech features, and premium trim levels were dominating sales charts. Today, luxury trucks like the GMC Sierra Denali, Ford F-150 Platinum, and Ram Limited owe their existence to the Cameo's groundbreaking approach. Now, more than 6 decades after its production ended, the Cameo carrier has found a new appreciation among collectors. Its limited production numbers, unique styling, and historical significance make it one of the most desirable classic trucks. While it may have been a sales flop in the 1950s, today it is seen as a visionary design that paved the way for the modern pickup truck. What was once dismissed as an impractical oddity is now recognized as a pioneering step in truck evolution. The 1958 Ford Ranchero was one of the most peculiar vehicles ever created, a machine that blurred the line between car and truck in a way that confused buyers, divided enthusiasts, and ultimately carved out a unique, albeit niche, place in automotive history. It was Ford's attempt to offer something different, a vehicle with the ride quality and comfort of a passenger car, but the utility of a pickup truck. The idea was bold, forward-thinking, and in some ways, completely impractical. The concept of the Ranchero was simple. Take a station wagon, chop off the rear passenger section, and replace it with a pickup bed. Unlike traditional body-on-frame trucks, the Ranchero used a unibody construction, which meant the cab and bed were integrated into a single piece, rather than having a separate box bolted onto the frame. This design gave it a sleeker, more refined appearance than a standard pickup, making it look more at home in suburban driveways than on rugged job sites. Ford marketed it as a vehicle for ranchers, small business owners, and weekend adventurers, people who needed some level of practicality but didn't want to drive a big, bulky truck. Mechanically, the Ranchero was based on the Ford Fairlane, meaning it shared the same platform, suspension, and many interior components with Ford's full-size cars. Buyers could choose from a variety of engines, starting with a basic 223 cubic inch inline six, which provided adequate performance but wasn't particularly exciting. Those looking for more power could opt for one of several V8 engines, including the 292 cubic inch Y-block and the top-tier 352 cubic inch Interceptor V8, which produced a respectable 300 horsepower. This made the Ranchero surprisingly quick in a straight line, and it could easily outrun most traditional work trucks of the era. But that speed came at a cost. Its car-based suspension was never designed for heavy-duty work, and the moment owners actually tried to use the Ranchero as a truck, its flaws became painfully clear. Owner review. I loved my Ranchero until I actually tried using it as a truck. It sagged when I loaded it, and people constantly asked me if it was a custom job. I wanted something stylish but still practical, and the Ranchero only delivered half of that. One of the biggest issues with the Ranchero was its payload capacity. Despite looking like a truck, it simply wasn't built for serious hauling. The rear suspension, derived from the Fairlane's softer setup, wasn't strong enough to handle large loads, and if you put too much weight in the bed, the rear end would sag dramatically. Unlike traditional pickups with stiff leaf spring suspensions, the Ranchero had a more compliant ride, which made it great for cruising, but terrible for real work. Many owners discovered that even a modestly heavy load, such as a few hay bales or a stack of lumber, would cause the back end to droop noticeably, making it clear that the Ranchero was more about style than substance. Another problem was its identity crisis. In the late 1950s, the average truck buyer wanted something tough, durable, and capable of handling farm work, construction jobs, or heavy towing. The Ranchero, with its two-tone paint options, chrome trim, and car-like interior, felt too delicate for those buyers. At the same time, car enthusiasts didn't see the appeal of a pickup bed. If they wanted a comfortable, stylish vehicle, they would just buy a regular car. This left the Ranchero stranded in an awkward middle ground, too fancy for truck guys and too truck-like for car guys. Then came Chevrolet with the El Camino. Introduced in 1959 as a direct response to the Ranchero, the El Camino took the same basic idea, but executed it in a way that resonated more with buyers. Chevy's version looked sportier, had a more aggressive design, and eventually gained a reputation as a muscle truck, especially in the late 1960s and early 1970s. With the El Camino stealing attention, the Ranchero struggled to maintain its footing in the market, leading to frequent redesigns and shifts in positioning. That being said, the The Ranchero did find some success, particularly among buyers who wanted a vehicle that was unique and stylish. Some small business owners appreciated its practicality for light-duty deliveries, while suburban buyers liked the idea of a vehicle that could handle occasional hauling without sacrificing ride quality. And despite its lack of serious work truck capabilities, the Ranchero had a certain charm. There was something undeniably cool about a vehicle that looked like a car but had the functionality of a truck, even if that functionality was somewhat limited. Today, the 1958 Ford Ranchero is a rare and interesting collector's item. It represents a time when automakers were willing to take risks and experiment with new vehicle concepts, even if they didn't always succeed. Though it never achieved the widespread popularity of traditional pickups, the 1955 Dodge C3 Power Wagon was not just a truck, it was a rolling fortress, a civilian version of the military vehicle that had earned a reputation for being virtually indestructible. At a time when most pickup trucks were evolving into more user-friendly machines with better road manners and increased comfort, Dodge took a different approach. They doubled down on ruggedness, creating a vehicle that was less about convenience and more about conquering any terrain thrown its way. This wasn't just another farm truck. It was a workhorse born from the battlefields of World War II. Dodge had been supplying military trucks to the U.S. Army since the early 1940s, and once the war ended, they saw an opportunity to repurpose their proven designs for civilian use. Thus, the Power Wagon was born, a truck that looked, felt, and performed like a military vehicle, because at its core, that's exactly what it was. The 1955 model, part of the C3 series, continued this tradition with an updated front grille and minor refinements, but it remained as tough as ever. Under the hood, the Power Wagon was powered by a 230 cubic inch flathead inline-six, producing a modest 110 horsepower and 190 of torque. It wasn't fast, far from it. The truck's immense weight and primitive gearing meant that reaching 45 mph felt like an achievement, and anything over 50 mph was a nerve-wracking experience. The Power Wagon's non-synchronized transmission required double clutching for smooth shifts, and the unassisted steering demanded serious muscle, especially at low speeds. Driving one of these was less about cruising and more about wrestling a mechanical beast into submission. Owner review. It could climb a mountain but couldn't go over 50 mph without shaking itself apart. It was built like a tank and drove like one too. But what it lacked in speed, it made up for in brute strength. The Power Wagon featured a heavy-duty four-wheel drive system with massive knobby tires and a two-speed transfer case, giving it unmatched off-road capability. It could crawl over rocks, wade through deep mud, and climb impossibly steep inclines with ease. Farmers, ranchers, and construction workers loved it because it could go where no other truck dared to venture. One of the Power Wagon's most unique features was its factory-installed PTO, power takeoff, winch mounted at the front bumper. Rated for 10,000 pounds, this winch could pull the truck out of nearly any situation, or pull other vehicles, and sometimes even small buildings, out of the way. Owners quickly learned that the Power Wagon wasn't just a truck, it was a tool, a piece of heavy equipment that could be relied upon for the toughest jobs. Despite its strengths, the Power Wagon was not for the faint of heart. The ride was punishingly stiff, thanks to its heavy-duty leaf springs, and the cab was as Spartan as they came. Bare metal floors, minimal padding, and a dashboard that looked like it was ripped straight from a military Jeep. Heat and noise insulation were non-existent, meaning that long drives felt more like endurance tests than comfortable road trips. Yet for those who needed uncompromising durability, there was no better choice. The Power Wagon became legendary for its reliability and toughness. It was the kind of truck that could sit abandoned in a field for 20 years, then be pulled out, given fresh fuel, and still fire up like it had been parked the day before. Stories of these trucks surviving decades of abuse, outlasting their owners, and being passed down through generations are common. Today, the 1955 Dodge C3 Power Wagon is a highly sought-after collector's item, especially among vintage 4x4 enthusiasts. Restored examples command high prices, and their off-road capabilities still rival some modern trucks. It remains one of the most iconic pickups ever built, a true testament to Dodge's no-nonsense approach to engineering. In the end, the Power Wagon wasn't about speed, comfort, or convenience. It was about raw, unfiltered capability. It was slow, heavy, and exhausting to drive, but it was also unstoppable. If you needed a truck that could survive the apocalypse, this was the one you'd want in your garage. The 1959 Chevrolet El Camino was truly a product of its time, an automotive experiment that went against the grain of conventional thinking. In the 1950s, the American car market was evolving rapidly, and manufacturers were pushing boundaries in every direction. Chevrolet, ever the innovator, looked at the Ford Ranchero and thought, we can make something even wilder. The result was the first-generation El Camino, a vehicle that combined the worst aspects of both cars and trucks and somehow managed to become an icon in its own right. At first glance, the 1959 El Camino resembled a Bel Air station wagon with its unique, elongated rear end. Its design was bold and daring, featuring swooping lines, large chrome bumpers, and distinctive fins on the rear fenders. It was undeniably eye-catching. And the 1959 Chevrolet styling, which was heavy on chrome and rounded body shapes, was one of the defining features of that era. The front end of the El Camino was particularly striking, with a wide grille that almost seemed to dominate the vehicle's face, giving it an aggressive look that made it stand out from any other vehicle on the road. Despite its aggressive front end and eye-catching styling, the rear end was where things got awkward. The bed of the El Camino, which was supposed to provide utility and practicality, was not much more than an afterthought. It was small, shallow, and surprisingly unfit for serious hauling. The bed could carry only small loads, and the issue with sagging suspension became a common complaint from owners who tried to load anything more than a couple of bags of mulch. Simply put, the bed wasn't built to do the heavy lifting one would expect from a pickup truck. The issue of the rear suspension was one of the many compromises Chevrolet had to make in their attempt to create a vehicle that straddled the line between car and truck. Unlike the dedicated body-on-frame construction of a proper pickup, the El Camino was built using the same frame as the Chevrolet Impala, a full-size car. This meant that while the El Camino had a relatively comfortable car-like ride, it wasn't equipped to handle the type of heavy-duty work that trucks were expected to endure. As a result, when owners tried to carry larger loads, the suspension couldn't cope, leading to a sagging rear end and an uncomfortable, inefficient ride. Despite these shortcomings, the 1959 El Camino had a lot going for it in terms of its engine options. It was available with a range of engines, including a 283 cubic inch V8 and a more powerful 348 cubic inch V8, which delivered a respectable 230 horsepower. The V8 engine options gave the El Camino a healthy dose of power, and for its time, it was fairly quick. However, in terms of utility, it didn't have the rugged capability that a traditional truck owner would expect. The combination of car-like handling and truck-like utility only made the El Camino feel like an awkward middle ground that neither offered the best of both worlds nor fully excelled in either category. In terms of design and marketing, the 1959 Chevrolet El Camino represented a daring and somewhat misguided attempt to push the boundaries of automotive engineering. While the Ranchero had already introduced the idea of a car-truck hybrid, the El Camino took things to a new extreme, offering an odd mix of luxury and utility that no one was quite sure how to appreciate. Its low ride height made it hard to carry heavy loads, and its large, wide body made it less agile than most sedans and cars. It was too fancy for people looking for a workhorse, but it wasn't nearly refined enough to appeal to those who wanted a true passenger vehicle. Owner review. It looked cool, but if you put anything heavy in the back, the rear suspension dropped like a rock. It couldn't haul much, and I was constantly worried about scratching the chrome when loading it. I loved the look, but I really couldn't use it the way I'd hoped. Despite its limitations, the 1959 Chevrolet El Camino still became a beloved and highly sought-after vehicle for collectors. Its unique look and rarity, combined with the cachet of being quirky, unconventional choice from Chevrolet, turned it into an icon of 1950s automotive history. For all its faults, the El Camino captured the spirit of the era, bold, experimental, and full of character. Its strange blend of car and truck, luxury and utility, made it one of those vehicles that didn't quite work, but that was what made it memorable. Over the years, the El Camino has become a symbol of Chevrolet's bold attempt to innovate in a market that was beginning to see the rise of muscle cars, sporty vehicles, and more practical trucks. The 1959 El Camino represents an era when car manufacturers were unafraid to break the mold and create something entirely new, even if it didn't always work out in the end. It was a glimpse into the future of automotive experimentation, and for collectors and enthusiasts today, the 1952 Crosley Farm-O-Road might just be one of the most bizarre and impractical vehicles ever produced, and that's what makes it both endearing and ridiculous. Crosley Motors, which gained some fame in the post-war era for producing small, inexpensive cars and trucks, introduced the Farm-O-Road as a solution for farmers who needed a utility vehicle to haul light loads around their properties. The idea was simple: offer an affordable, compact, and somewhat rugged vehicle for farmers who didn't need a full-size truck, but still wanted the functionality of a small, versatile workhorse. Unfortunately, the Farm-O-Road was far from a workhorse. Imagine taking one of those tiny pint-sized cars from the 1940s and 50s, adding a pickup bed to the back, and calling it a farm truck. That was the essence of the Farm-O-Road. Under the hood sat a 26-horsepower engine, an engine that wouldn't even allow you to outrun a city bus, let alone carry a full load of heavy equipment or tools. But Crosley thought, why not? The engine was so small it could hardly keep up with a leisurely stroll, and it was coupled with an equally puny 10-inch wheelbase, which made driving this vehicle on anything other than smooth, flat surfaces nothing short of an adventure. The Farm-O-Road's tiny wheels were more suited for an amusement park ride than any kind of off-roading or farm work. What was meant to be a functional little truck quickly revealed its limitations. The pickup bed was tiny, barely big enough to fit a few bags of fertilizer or a couple of small hay bales. Even a small stack of firewood would stretch its capacity. The real tragedy of the Crosley Farm-O-Road, however, was its complete lack of off-road capability. Although marketed as a farm truck, the vehicle had very little to offer when it came to actual utility. It would often get stuck on gentle inclines, struggled to get traction on dirt roads, and could barely handle the rough conditions found on even the most forgiving of farms. The farm work it could actually do usually involved very light tasks, mostly moving small loads over short distances or transporting the occasional tool to a nearby shed. But its lack of real usefulness didn't stop Crosley from pushing the vehicle as a farm workhorse. They marketed the Farm-O-Road as a solution for small farm operations that didn't want the bulk of a larger truck. In reality, it became more of a novelty item, something quirky and fun for rural folks who didn't want a full-size pickup, but also didn't need something that could handle a full day of farm labor. The Crosley Farm-O-Road was a classic example of a vehicle that had great ambitions, but was severely limited by its own design and execution. It was marketed as an all-terrain truck, but its tiny engine, laughable suspension, and miniature wheels made it less of a powerhouse and more of a quirky oddity. In fact, many owners quickly discovered that the vehicle wasn't practical at all for any real work. The idea of taking it on an off-road journey often ended in defeat when it got stuck on even the most minor dirt paths. Its struggles on rough terrain were legendary, with owners often having to push the little truck out of its own messes. An experience that probably left more than one owner questioning their decision to buy such a farm truck in the first place. Despite its shortcomings, there was a certain charm to the Farm-O-Road. It was so small and whimsical that it became a curiosity for many. It wasn't a powerhouse like the larger farm trucks, but it was undeniably adorable in its own way. It's the kind of vehicle that people would look at and ask, "What is that thing?" with a combination of confusion and awe. Owners would often park it in their barns simply because it was fun to own a piece of automotive history, even if it couldn't be relied on for much more than a bit of light transportation. If nothing else, the Crosley Farm-O-Road was proof that not all vehicles need to be practical to be interesting. Owner review. I took it off-road once. That was a mistake. It got stuck on a dirt road and I had to push it out myself. It was embarrassing, to be honest. I spent more time trying to get it unstuck than actually getting anything done. But man, when it wasn't stuck, I could just cruise around the property in style. It was like a little toy, but a toy that somehow managed to be kind of fun. In a way, the Crosley Farm-O-Road is a testament to the experimental spirit of the 1950s, when car manufacturers were willing to try just about anything to make a quick buck. And while the Farm-O-Road was far from successful, it remains a quirky and memorable example of how sometimes vehicles that are complete failures can still capture the imagination. Today, the Farm-O-Road is a collector's item, a rare, oddball piece of history that serves as a reminder of just how strange and unexpected the world of automobiles can be. The 1957 Fargo Sweptside stands as a peculiar example of automotive design from an era where manufacturers were willing to take risks and push boundaries, often in ways that blurred the lines between practical transportation and showy luxury. Produced by Chrysler's Fargo division, which primarily served the Canadian market, the Sweptside was a truck meant to compete with the burgeoning world of stylish luxury cars, all while retaining its pickup truck roots. The result? A vehicle that was part workhorse, part high fashion statement, a combination that didn't quite work as intended. At the core of the Sweptside's outlandish appeal were its extravagant tail fins, which were inspired by the same tail fin craze that swept the US during the 1950s. These tail fins, which had become synonymous with elegance, speed, and futuristic design, were an aesthetic flourish rather than a functional feature. The idea behind incorporating them into a truck's design was to add an air of sophistication to a vehicle that was primarily built to be a utilitarian, no-nonsense workhorse. But instead of enhancing the truck's utility or performance, the tail fins ended up being a somewhat misplaced design choice that made the vehicle less practical and more prone to complications. The tail fins were large and jutting, almost like something you would expect to see on a Cadillac rather than a pickup truck. While they undoubtedly gave the Sweptside a unique and flashy look, they were hardly conducive to everyday use, especially for those who intended to use the truck for its original purpose, hauling and carrying goods. In fact, the sweeping fins created practical challenges when it came to reversing the truck. The sheer size of the fins made it nearly impossible to judge how much space you had behind the vehicle, often resulting in owners nervously inching backward, constantly worried they would scrape the rear corners of the truck on obstacles or other vehicles. It was a design feature that, while stylish, turned into more of a hindrance than an asset. Additionally, the Sweptside's hybrid nature, part truck, part luxury vehicle, was a bit of a conundrum. It was built to be sturdy, but it was too fancy to be treated like a regular work truck. The truck bed, while functional, was too sleek and polished to carry heavy loads without causing visible damage to its well-crafted exterior. Owners often found themselves reluctant to use it as a true pickup, opting instead to use it as a stylish vehicle for casual driving rather than a rugged tool for heavy-duty work. This mismatch between its luxury-inspired design and utilitarian needs made it a vehicle that was more about appearances than performance. Moreover, the truck's relatively small bed was more suitable for carrying personal items or light loads, but it struggled to handle the type of heavy lifting that many truck owners expect. The truck didn't have the muscle to compete with full-fledged work trucks of the time, and yet it was styled to look like something you might see in a showroom next to a luxury car. This conflict between style and substance left many owners scratching their heads, unsure whether they had purchased a unique collector's item or an impractical gimmick. Despite these limitations, the 1957 Fargo Sweptside has garnered its fair share of collectors and enthusiasts today. As an example of mid-century automotive design, it remains an important historical artifact, showcasing the experimentation and boldness of car manufacturers who sought to push the boundaries of what a vehicle could be. Its rarity and unique styling make it an attractive option for collectors who are drawn to vehicles that embody the eccentricity and flair of the 1950s. In today's world, the Sweptside is revered as a quirky collector's item, representing an era where style often outweighed practicality. In the end, the Fargo Sweptside was a vehicle that tried to be something it wasn't, a showpiece masquerading as a truck, and while it may have failed to be an entirely practical vehicle, it succeeded in standing out as one of the most visually distinctive pickups ever made, a reminder of the time when automakers didn't just focus on performance and utility, but also on creating cars that could make a statement. The Sweptside might not have been the perfect workhorse, but it certainly made an impression, and that's something that not many vehicles can claim. Owner review. The Sweptside was all about style over substance. I was absolutely in love with how it looked. Those tail fins were impossible to ignore. But every time I had to back up or park, I couldn't help but worry about scraping the rear corners. It was almost too nice to use as a regular truck. I couldn't load it with heavy stuff without fearing for the bodywork, and the ride was more luxury car than workhorse. Still, when people saw it on the road, they would always stop and stare. It may have been impractical. The 1950s Studebaker 2R5 pickup stands as a true symbol of automotive ambition, a vehicle that seemed to come from another era. With its cab and design so avant-garde that it could easily be mistaken for a spaceship, the 2R5 was a bold experiment in innovation and style. Its round, smooth nose made it a standout in a world full of traditional, utilitarian truck designs. The distinct aerodynamic look of the 2R5 made it one of the most futuristic vehicles of its time, and its appeal went beyond just being a truck. It was a statement, a glimpse of the future. The 2R5's design was inspired by modern aerodynamics, and it featured one of the first applications of curved glass in a production truck. The curved windshield was one of its most eye-catching features, contributing to the vehicle's sleek, streamlined appearance. This was a departure from the more squared, boxy designs that dominated the automotive landscape in the early 1950s. The curve of the windshield, along with the rounded edges and flowing lines of the cab, created a cohesive design that made the 2R5 one of the most memorable trucks in automotive history. It was the kind of truck that turned heads, the kind of vehicle that made people stop and stare, wondering if it was a truck or something else entirely. However, as with most innovations, the 2R5's futuristic design came at a cost, both literally and figuratively. While the truck looked amazing, its cutting-edge features were difficult to maintain. The specialized curved glass that made the truck stand out also made it a nightmare when it came to repairs. The windshield alone was a challenge to replace, and finding parts for a truck that was so far ahead of its time proved to be a difficult task. While the truck's design might have been something to marvel at, the practicality of living with a vehicle that had such niche parts soon became apparent. For owners, this issue was frustrating, to say the least. What initially seemed like a cool, forward-thinking design quickly revealed its shortcomings. As one owner humorously recalled, replacing the windshield of the 2R5 cost more than the truck itself. This was not the only problem. The truck's body panels, for example, weren't just expensive to repair, but they were often very hard to find. Some owners resorted to scouring junkyards for any remnants of the 2R5, while others simply gave up on finding replacement parts altogether. But beyond the repair challenges, the 2R5 was an iconic truck. Its rarity today only adds to its mystique. While it may not have been the most practical choice for the average person, for the true car enthusiast, it represents the spirit of innovation that defined the 1950s automotive landscape. The 2R5 captured the imagination of its time and continues to do so today. Often celebrated for its audacious design and bold departure from the norm. Despite its quirks and impracticalities, the 1950 Studebaker 2R5 remains a beloved piece of automotive history. It was a truck that tried to be more than just a vehicle. It was a piece of art. Unfortunately, art doesn't always come with a practical side. The truck's design, while stunning, made it a difficult companion for those who wanted a reliable workhorse. The story of the 2R5 is a lesson in how ambition and innovation can sometimes clash with reality. While it looked like the future, it wasn't necessarily built to last in the real world. But for those who were lucky enough to own one, the 2R5 remains an unforgettable part of their automotive past, a reminder of a time when cars were more than just transportation. They were dreams in motion. Owner review. I fell in love with the 2R5 because it was like nothing I'd ever seen. It was futuristic, sleek, and got more attention than any other truck on the road. But as much as I loved it, there were some big issues. Replacing the curved windshield? A nightmare. I learned the hard way that keeping a truck like this on the road wasn't cheap. Finding parts was next to impossible. And when I did, the cost was often more than I had paid for the truck itself. It was fun to drive, no doubt, but practicality wasn't its strong suit. If you're buying this truck, do it for the cool factor, but be ready for some serious repair bills. The 1955 Ford F-100 panel truck is often remembered as one of the most curious, unconventional creations to emerge from Ford during the mid-1950s. Designed as a variant of the iconic F-100 pickup, the panel truck was essentially a pickup without its most essential feature, the bed. Instead of the traditional cargo area, Ford offered a windowless, enclosed space that transformed what should have been a practical, utilitarian vehicle into something that was neither a truck nor a van. This design left many potential buyers scratching their heads, unsure of exactly what the truck was meant to do. It was a vehicle that existed in a strange middle ground, with the charm of a truck but the limitations of a van. From a distance, the F-100 panel truck still carried the classic F-100 design language, with its familiar front-end styling and grille. But upon closer inspection, it became clear that something was amiss. The truck had no open cargo bed, just a sealed, windowless box behind the front seats. Essentially, it was a van-like structure attached to the front end of a pickup. Ford's goal with this vehicle seemed to be to create a commercial vehicle that didn't fully commit to either the truck or the van category. What it resulted in, however, was a highly impractical vehicle for the average person who needed a reliable, capable hauler. In terms of utility, the lack of a traditional bed made the F-100 panel truck somewhat useless for many of the purposes one would expect from a pickup. Hauling heavy loads, carrying large or bulky items, and towing were all made incredibly difficult by the truck's unique design. While the enclosed rear cargo area was spacious, it wasn't ideal for transporting things like lumber, furniture, or equipment that would typically be hauled in a standard truck bed. The lack of an open cargo area was a fundamental flaw, one that left owners with few viable options for using the truck as intended. It was as if Ford had tried to give truck buyers the benefits of an enclosed space but forgot that these buyers also needed to carry things with practicality and ease. Instead of a tool for work, it became an oddity that was difficult to justify. However, for some, the F-100 panel truck still had an appeal. The clean, minimalist design of the rear cargo area offered a unique canvas for customization, making it a popular choice for entrepreneurs, especially those looking to convert it into a service vehicle. One of the most common uses for these trucks was as a delivery vehicle, particularly in businesses like ice cream trucks or mobile shops, where the enclosed area could house equipment or supplies. Its lack of windows allowed for some privacy for the driver and gave the vehicle a unique charm. People who used it for such businesses often praised the panel truck for its potential to be easily converted into a mobile business, making it an ideal fit for certain niche markets. In this context, the lack of a bed was actually a positive, as it provided a more enclosed and secure space than a traditional open truck bed. That said, for those who simply needed a work vehicle, the lack of a bed was a major flaw. No matter how you looked at it, a pickup truck without a bed just didn't make sense. Many owners found themselves frustrated by its inability to perform like a traditional pickup. It simply wasn't equipped for the job, whether they were trying to haul dirt, transport furniture, or move construction materials. The lack of a bed turned a vehicle meant for work into a vehicle with no real purpose, leaving owners with a truck that couldn't quite do what it was supposed to do. In hindsight, the 1955 Ford F-100 panel truck is now viewed as a strange and short-lived experiment in vehicle design. While it didn't exactly hit the mark in terms of practicality, it did represent a time when automakers were pushing the boundaries of vehicle concepts. The F-100 panel truck was a vehicle caught between two worlds, one that didn't fully embrace the versatility of a truck and another that didn't have the benefits of a van. It was a vehicle that could never quite decide what it wanted to be, and as a result, it didn't fully succeed in either category. Despite its flaws, the F-100 panel truck has become a curious footnote in automotive history. It's remembered as one of Ford's most eccentric creations, a vehicle that didn't quite fit in, but still managed to carve out a niche among those who appreciated its oddball design. Today, the F-100 panel truck remains a rare sight, often admired by classic car enthusiasts for its quirkiness and originality. It's a reminder of a time when car companies were unafraid to experiment with new ideas, even if they didn't always work out as planned. Owner review. I bought a 1955 F100 panel truck thinking it would be a cool and unique way to haul stuff, but without a bed, it just didn't work the way I expected. Every time I needed to carry something substantial, the 1958 International A100 Golden Jubilee was a bold and almost surreal attempt by International Harvester to celebrate its 50th anniversary. This special edition truck was designed with such a lavish and extravagant flair that it completely defied the typical utilitarian expectations of a farm vehicle. It had the body of a classic workhorse, but was decked out in gold paint, chrome details, and an interior that seemed far too plush for the rough and tumble world of agriculture. When the Golden Jubilee was first introduced, it must have been an absolute showstopper. The gold finish, which was an eye-catching hue of metallic gold, gave the truck a sense of luxury, something you'd more likely associate with a high-end sedan or an exclusive limited edition sports car rather than a rugged truck meant for working in the fields. The chrome trim accents enhanced this opulent feel, making it gleam like a trophy truck. If you were in a showroom at the time, it was hard not to be impressed by its shining presence. However, the truck's sophisticated exterior quickly revealed its paradox. This was meant to be a work vehicle, a tough, reliable companion for farmers and laborers who relied on their trucks to get the job done. Whether it was hauling grain, transporting tools, or navigating muddy and rugged fields. The very attributes that made the Golden Jubilee such an eye-catching and unique creation were also the very things that undermined its practical use. The gold paint was undoubtedly stunning, but it was also incredibly delicate. Any sort of rough handling, scratches, or scuffs would ruin its glossy finish. And those chrome trim pieces? They weren't just decorative. They were prone to rust and damage in the harsh working conditions that a true farm truck was expected to endure. The plush interior, while luxurious, was another point of contention. Instead of the simple utilitarian benches and easy-to-clean surfaces found in most trucks, the Golden Jubilee featured plush upholstery, more appropriate for a luxury sedan than something meant to haul tools, livestock, or heavy equipment. This lavish interior made it difficult for farmers to use it for the tough, dirty work that trucks were typically used for. It was difficult to imagine this truck transporting anything that could get it dirty without the owner thinking twice about the mess it would make. It was a truck that was, at best, a showpiece, a vehicle to drive around and admire. But for those who needed a true, functional vehicle for hauling, lifting, and transporting, it was a disappointment. Farmers who had initially been attracted to the truck's glitzy appearance soon found themselves hesitant to use it for the very tasks that a truck should have been able to perform. Many simply couldn't bear the thought of scratching the pristine gold paint or dirtying the plush interior. So the truck was relegated to a life of sitting in the garage or under a cover, unused, and essentially locked away as an ornament rather than a tool. It's hard to blame the owners who were wary of putting the truck to work. It was clear from the outset that this truck wasn't built with that purpose in mind. The Golden Jubilee wasn't meant to get dirty or banged up, which made it impossible for many buyers to justify using it as their primary workhorse. And this disconnect between form and function led to many of these trucks sitting idle, making them rare and highly coveted by collectors today. While the Golden Jubilee may not have been a practical truck, it's important to recognize what it represents in automotive history. It symbolizes a time when manufacturers, including International Harvester, were willing to experiment with bold and unusual designs, even if those designs weren't necessarily practical for everyday use. The truck became a symbol of a bygone era, where trucks didn't just need to be functional. They could also be stylish, luxurious, and, in some cases, borderline impractical. For collectors, the 1958 International A100 Golden Jubilee is a fascinating piece of automotive history. Its rarity and distinctive design make it a valuable gem in the world of vintage trucks. While it may not have served the purpose of a working truck, it serves as a reminder that sometimes design and aesthetics can outweigh practicality, leading to unique, memorable creations that live on in the world of automotive enthusiasts. Owner review. I bought the Golden Jubilee hoping for something special. The gold paint and chrome trim made it feel like a one-of-a-kind truck, but when I tried to use it like a normal work truck, it was a letdown. The gold finish was so delicate that I couldn't bring myself to haul anything with it. I ended up just driving it around to show it off at car shows. It was a truck that didn't really want to be a truck, more like an ornament that you couldn't really use. The 1957 Dodge Sweptside was more than just a pickup. It was a statement of bold, unapologetic design that caught the eye of anyone who laid eyes on it. A product of the 1950s, an era known for its love of dramatic design flourishes, the Sweptside brought something completely unique to the world of trucks. Dodge took the daring step of fusing the radical tail fin styling of their passenger cars with the utilitarian world of pickup trucks. The result was an eccentric blend of form and function that had as many admirers as it had detractors. When you first saw the Sweptside, the most immediately noticeable feature was, of course, the tail fins. These weren't just any tail fins, they were the same eye-catching fins that adorned Dodge's 1957 cars, a design element that symbolized the futuristic optimism of the time. The tail fins extended upward from the rear of the truck in sharp, dramatic angles, giving the Sweptside an almost jet-like appearance. It had the sort of visual impact that made you stop in your tracks, but not always for the right reasons. On the one hand, the design was undeniably stunning. The long, sleek lines of the truck's body combined with the imposing fins created a visual spectacle. It had the kind of aesthetic that turned heads wherever it went. The Sweptside was a truck with an attitude, something that set it apart from the utilitarian work trucks of the time. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a piece of art, something to be admired and shown off. Dodge clearly saw it as a way to appeal to those who wanted their truck to be as glamorous as it was functional, and the tail fins certainly accomplished that goal. But as with many design innovations, the beauty of the Sweptside came at a cost. While it was a work of automotive art, it also became a practical nightmare for those who tried to use it as a day-to-day truck. The tail fins, while striking, made the vehicle extremely difficult to park. The extended fins blocked the driver's view of the rear, turning simple maneuvers like parking or reversing into a game of guesswork. Parking the Sweptside in a garage or tight space became a challenge that many owners found frustrating, to say the least. Some owners have shared their experiences of backing up with the Sweptside, and it wasn't pretty. One owner recalls that it was nearly impossible to judge the distance between the rear of the truck and any obstacles due to the size of the tail fins. The fins, which gave the truck its signature look, became a huge blind spot, making it difficult for the driver to gauge just how much space was behind them. It wasn't just about parking in tight spots, it was a constant battle to avoid hitting things while reversing. And for many, it led to more than a few bumps and scratches. Every time I tried to park it, I had to get out and check if I was close to hitting something, said one owner, laughing. And more than once, I ended up backing into my own garage door because I just couldn't see the distance. Another owner described how, after having owned the truck for a while, they had grown so wary of backing it up that they simply started parking it in the most spacious spots they could find, just to avoid the stress. The truck was beautiful, they said, but it was a nightmare to park, especially in a tight garage. Despite the practical drawbacks, the Sweptside left a lasting impression. Even though it was difficult to use as a work truck, it still found a following among collectors and vintage truck enthusiasts. The design, while impractical, was a reflection of the era's obsession with forward-thinking aesthetics. It was a pickup truck that was designed to make a statement, and it did so with flair. The tail fins themselves have become a symbol of the era's automotive style, one that was larger than life, dramatic, and in many ways unrestrained. The Dodge Sweptside was a truck that didn't just fit into the mold, it completely shattered it. It wasn't practical, but it was bold, and that's what made it stand out. For those who appreciated its design, the Sweptside represented a moment in automotive history when style was just as important as function, even if that meant compromising practicality. The 1957 Dodge Sweptside may have been a truck with a massive visual presence, but it wasn't one that made sense for the average consumer. It was flashy, futuristic, and fantastic in its appearance, but its awkwardness in real-world use left many owners frustrated. Still, there was something undeniably charming about it, a strange beauty that made it a beloved oddity among vintage car collectors. Owner review. It was a beautiful truck, but the tail fins were a nightmare. I loved driving it, but parking was another story. I hit my garage door more than once, and I had to constantly worry about scratching the rear of the truck. It was a showstopper, but not a very practical vehicle to own. The 1950 Jeep Willys pickup was one of those vehicles that embodied function over form, practicality over performance. Designed with rugged utility in mind, the Willys pickup was a symbol of the Jeep brand's storied history, rooted in its role during World War II. However, unlike the robust military vehicles it was based on, this truck was not meant for speed, luxury, or comfort. It was made to haul, work, and last. This particular pickup came with a small, underpowered, four-cylinder engine that was barely able to muster 60 horsepower. To put this in perspective, modern compact cars have engines that are often double, if not triple, that power. The Jeep Willys was never designed to compete in races or impress on highways. It was meant to be a workhorse. But with its lack of power, the pickup struggled to keep up with anything other than the slowest of traffic. One of the biggest challenges of owning a Jeep Willys pickup was its agonizing lack of speed. Even with a headwind or a slight incline, it would bog down and struggle to maintain any real pace. The truck's top speed, if you could call it that, was around 55 mph. For anyone who had the misfortune of driving it on a freeway, this was a nightmare. It was as if time slowed down, and every other car on the road felt like it was passing at light speed. One of the most memorable aspects of driving the Willys pickup was how vulnerable it made its owners feel on the highway. While modern vehicles zipped by, the truck felt like it was working its hardest just to stay afloat. And even though the engine was working at full capacity, there was no thrill or excitement in driving it. Just a feeling of the truck trudging along, begging for mercy. It wasn't built for speed. It was built to be tough, and that toughness didn't translate well into highway travel. Owner review. I had to take the Willys on the highway once, never again. It was honestly the longest, most excruciating drive I've ever had. Every other vehicle was speeding past me like I was standing still. The truck didn't have the guts to keep up with modern traffic, and I was terrified that it would stall out on me at any given moment. I remember glancing at the speedometer and seeing it barely inching towards 50 mph. At one point, I swear I was going downhill, and the truck still couldn't hit 55. While driving it at highway speeds felt like an ordeal, the Jeep Willys pickup excelled in its intended domain, off-road, on farms, and in the most rugged of environments. Its four-wheel drive system allowed it to traverse muddy fields, uneven terrain, and steep slopes, making it a trusted companion for farmers and off-road enthusiasts alike. The truck was tough and could carry a hefty load, even if it couldn't accelerate fast enough to get there in a hurry. Yet despite its off-road prowess, the truck's lack of speed and modern conveniences often turned people off when they attempted to use it in any capacity other than as a utility vehicle. The truck was a relic of an era that didn't demand speed as much as it demanded strength. In modern times, the lack of performance became more apparent to drivers who were used to faster, more capable vehicles. The Jeep Willys pickup might have been the slowest truck of its era, but it was also one of the most durable and practical. Its simplicity and ruggedness were what gave it its charm, but that didn't change the fact that it was excruciatingly slow when it came to getting from one place to another in a hurry. Whether hauling crops, tools, or just being used as a farm vehicle, the Willys pickup was a tool more than it was a vehicle to enjoy on a road trip. Despite being one of the slowest trucks ever produced, the Jeep Willys pickup was beloved by those who appreciated its reliability, its off-road capabilities, and its straightforward design. But it also taught owners a lesson in patience, something that not every driver can appreciate. Owner review. It was perfect for what I needed, hauling stuff, going through rough terrain, and generally being a tough little truck. But if you plan on taking it on the highway, be prepared for one of the most tedious and slow-moving experiences of your life. I'd do anything to avoid another highway trip in that thing. I'll stick to the back roads where it shines. In the end, the Jeep Willys pickup wasn't a truck for the speed-loving enthusiast or anyone who expected to be impressed by its performance. It was, however, a testament to ruggedness and resilience, an old-fashioned workhorse that did exactly what it was designed to do, albeit at a painfully slow pace. The Willys pickup may not have been fast, but it was built to endure, and for those who needed it, that was more than enough. The 1953 Hudson Hornet utility was a bizarre attempt by the American automaker to turn its popular Hornet sedan into a utilitarian vehicle. At a time when many manufacturers were trying to capitalize on the growing truck market, Hudson decided to take a very unconventional road. They took the Hornet sedan, cut off the back, and added a truck bed. The result was a vehicle that looked like a car trying to be a truck, and it was as awkward as it sounds. From the outside, the Hudson Hornet utility resembled a regular sedan with a truck bed awkwardly slapped onto it. The rear end was noticeably elongated, and the smooth, curved design of the Hornet's body didn't mesh with the utilitarian purpose of a pickup. While the Hornet sedan was known for its sleek design and aerodynamic lines, the addition of a truck bed made it look almost unfinished, like someone started a project and didn't quite know where to stop. The most striking feature of the Hudson Hornet utility was its lack of proportion. It didn't ride high enough to be considered a true pickup truck, yet it was far too bulky and clunky to pass as a sleek, efficient car. The truck bed wasn't even large enough to make it a practical vehicle for hauling anything substantial, making it a vehicle that seemed to serve no real purpose. As a result, it was an odd mix of car and truck that nobody really asked for and nobody really wanted. Owner review. I owned a 1953 Hudson Hornet utility for a while, and every time I drove it, people would ask me, "Is that a custom job?" I would explain that it wasn't a custom job, but something Hudson actually made. It felt like I was driving a car with a truck bed that someone had hacked onto the back. It was a real conversation starter, but not for the reasons you want. No one really knew how to categorize it, and I was constantly explaining what it was. Despite its bizarre design, the Hudson Hornet utility had a reputation for reliability. Its base model, the Hornet sedan, was known for its smooth performance and impressive power, with its 308 cubic inch straight six engine providing solid performance. However, in pickup form, the utility version wasn't particularly useful. The bed wasn't big enough for serious work, and the vehicle's low ride height made it difficult to treat it like a traditional truck for hauling or towing. But it wasn't just the utility of the truck that made people scratch their heads, it was the aesthetic confusion. The Hudson Hornet utility seemed like a mismatch of ideas, a vehicle caught between two worlds. It wasn't sporty enough to be a true car, nor was it rugged enough to be a real truck. Instead, it stood out as a peculiar vehicle that didn't really belong anywhere. Over the years, the Hudson Hornet utility has remained a strange relic from the past. While it wasn't a true success, it has a place in the oddball history of cars that were too quirky to be practical but gained a certain cult following. Today, it's a rare find among collectors, mostly due to its unusual design and the sheer oddity of Hudson's decision to make it in the first place. Owner review. People would always stop and ask me what it was. I could tell they were trying to figure out whether it was some kind of custom build. The truck bed was so small and the whole thing was just strange. It was hard to take seriously, but there was a certain charm to it once you got used to the weirdness. In the end, the 1953 Hudson Hornet utility was a bizarre attempt at blending two entirely different vehicle types. It wasn't enough of a truck to compete with actual pickups, and it wasn't enough of a car to be a true sedan. It existed in this strange, uncomfortable space, and as a result, it never really found its audience. The Hornet utility remains a quirky curiosity, a product of an era where car manufacturers were experimenting with strange and unusual ideas, often without considering whether anyone actually needed them.